A simple dinner with his mother, the night before our wedding, turned my world upside down. I always thought the night before my wedding would be peaceful. Maybe a glass of wine, laughter with my bridesmaids, the soft hum of love songs in the background. But life has this strange way of twisting what we expect into something entirely different. Something unforgettable. That evening, I was alone in my apartment, surrounded by white roses and ribbons. The smell of fresh flowers mixed with the scent of rain coming through the open window. My wedding dress hung beside my bed, untouched, perfect, almost glowing in the dim light. Everything felt so ready. So close to perfect. And then my phone vibrated. Somme de notification leave. It was a message from Daniel, my fiancé. He wrote, "Mom wants you to come over for dinner tonight. Just the three of us. She said it's important." I remember staring at the message for a few seconds. Maybe longer. A small, uneasy feeling formed in my chest. Margaret, his mother, had always been polite, kind even, but there was a distance in her eyes whenever she looked at me. A kind of quiet evaluation, like she was trying to understand who I truly was beneath the smiles. Still, I thought, maybe she wanted to bond before the wedding. Maybe she wanted to tell me she approved of me, that she was happy I was marrying her son. I smiled at the thought, trying to push the nerves away. I texted back. "Of course. What time should I be there?" Daniel replied almost instantly. 7:30. "She's making your favorite, lemon rosemary chicken." It was strange. She'd never asked what my favorite meal was before. But I didn't question it. I wanted to believe this was her way of reaching out. Som ambiente. Porta do carro facendo, chuva mais forte, motor legato. By 7 o'clock, I was driving through the rain, my hands gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly. The city lights blurred through the windshield as I replayed every moment I'd ever shared with Margaret. Every word, every look. She was elegant, reserved, the kind of woman who commanded respect without saying much. I admired her, honestly. But I could never quite read her. As I drove up the winding road toward their house on the hill, I noticed how dark the sky had become. Flashes of lightning illuminated the tall iron gates that marked the entrance to their estate. The place looked timeless, like a memory frozen in time. When I parked and stepped out, the air smelled of wet earth and roses. I remember smoothing down my blue dress, checking my reflection in the car window, and whispering to myself, "You'll be fine, Elena. It's just dinner." But something deep inside me, something quiet and instinctive, whispered back, "No, it's not just dinner. Som de porta brindo, ambiente muda para o interior de casa. Som livre de talheres, passos, vos distant." Margaret opened the door before I could knock. She looked stunning as always, composed, elegant, not a hair out of place. "Come in, dear," she said, her tone gentle, but her eyes colder than usual. Daniel came to greet me right away, wrapping his arms around me, his warmth cutting through the strange tension in the air. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "You look beautiful." And just like that, my nerves melted for a moment. Everything felt right again. The house smelled of roasted herbs and citrus. The dining table was already set, candles flickering, silverware gleaming, wine glasses half filled. Everything was so perfect, it almost felt staged. As we sat down, Margaret poured the wine. "Red or white?" she asked politely. "White, please," I replied, smiling. We toasted, to love, to the future, to family. The first few minutes were pleasant. We spoke about the wedding decorations, the honeymoon plans, the music Daniel had chosen for our first dance. Margaret even smiled genuinely once or twice, and for a brief moment, I thought my worries had been silly. But then, her tone shifted. She began asking questions. Casual at first, then slightly more pointed. "So, Elena, tell me again where your family's from? Your father, he passed away when you were young, didn't he? What did he do for work, dear?" I answered as best I could, though my throat began to tighten with each question. Something about her tone made me feel as though she wasn't really asking. She was confirming. Daniel noticed it too. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened slightly, how his fingers tapped nervously on the edge of his glass. And then, after a pause that stretched too long, Margaret set her fork down, folded her hands, and said something that made my entire body go still. "Tell me, Elena. Does the name Robert Langford mean anything to you? My fork clattered against the plate. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My father's name. I stared at her, the sound of the rain outside suddenly louder, sharper, like a warning. How could she know that name? He was my father, I finally whispered. Why do you ask? Her lips curved into something between pity and disdain. Then she said quietly, almost as if she'd been rehearsing the words for years. Because, my dear, that man destroyed my family. Som de travail distant. Silencio pesado. Musica tensa comica lentamente. That was the moment, the exact second. I knew this night was not going to end as a simple dinner. It was the beginning of the storm that would change everything. For a few seconds after she said those words, that man destroyed my family, the air in the room seemed to freeze. I could hear nothing but the rain against the windows and the faint ticking of the antique clock on the wall. My father's name, Robert Langford, echoed inside my mind, over and over again. It was like the walls were closing in around me, suffocating me with a truth I wasn't ready to face. I looked at Daniel, hoping he would laugh it off, tell me his mother was mistaken, that this was just some awful misunderstanding. But he didn't say a word. He was staring at his mother, eyes wide, a muscle twitching in his jaw. And that silence was worse than anything she could have said. Som de respiração contida. De fundo o barulho de chuva aumentando. Margaret, he finally said, voice low but firm. What are you talking about? She didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed fixed on me. Sharp, assessing, almost triumphant. As if, after years of searching, she'd finally uncovered a secret that had been haunting her. She took a small sip of wine before speaking again. 25 years ago, my husband, your father, Daniel, had a business partner. A man named Robert Langford. Your father trusted him completely. They built their company together from nothing. They were like brothers. Her words came out slowly, carefully, like she wanted each one to hit its mark. And then, one night, everything vanished. Every dollar, every asset, every dream your father had worked for. Gone. He came home shattered. Broken. He said Robert took everything. That he vanished with the money and left us ruined. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. My father? The man who used to carry me on his shoulders and tell me bedtime stories about honesty and love? A thief? I shook my head slightly, barely able to whisper. That can't be true. Margaret's eyes flickered, not with cruelty, but with something that almost looked like grief. Believe me, dear, she said quietly. I wish it weren't. Daniel stood up suddenly, pacing behind his chair, running his fingers through his hair. He looked at me, then back at his mother. Mom, stop. This is insane. Elena didn't do anything. She wasn't even alive back then. I know, she replied sharply. But don't you see? History has a way of repeating itself. Lies run in bloodlines. Her voice trembled slightly on that last word. I could tell this wasn't just about revenge. This was about decades of pain. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. Mrs. Whitmore, with all due respect, I didn't even know about any of this. My mother never told me what really happened to my father. He left when I was little. I thought he abandoned us. She tilted her head slightly. Of course she didn't tell you. Would you tell your child that her father was a criminal? Her words pierced through me like glass. I could feel the sting of tears pressing at the back of my eyes, but I refused to cry. Not there. Not in front of her. Som ambiente, travail distant, o vento batendo contra as janelas. Daniel walked over to me, his hand trembling as he reached for mine. We'll figure this out, he whispered. There must be a mistake. Margaret sighed softly, almost as if she pitied him. You've always believed in happy endings, Daniel. But some truths don't come with them. Then she stood up, walked over to the fireplace, and picked up a small worn folder from the mantel. She placed it gently on the table between us. I wasn't planning to show you this until after the wedding, she said. But maybe it's better you know now, before you tie yourself to that name forever. The folder was yellowed, its edges torn, the paper inside brittle with age. Daniel opened it hesitantly. Inside were photos. 2 men smiling in front of a new office building. My father and Daniel's father. And beneath the photos, letters, contracts, bank statements. The numbers didn't lie. They painted a story, one where my father's signature appeared next to unauthorized withdrawals, falsified documents, disappearing funds. Daniel's hands shook as he flipped through the pages. His face turned pale. He didn't look at me. I could feel my throat tightening. The words I wanted to say, "This isn't true. My father wasn't like that," died before they left my lips. Because deep down, a part of me wondered, what if it was true? What if I had been living all my life under the shadow of a lie? Som ambiente. Chuva mais forte, trovos, vento. The candles flickered violently as the storm outside grew louder. Margaret sat back down, watching me quietly, like she was waiting for me to defend myself. But I couldn't. I didn't even know where to begin. Finally, I said softly, "If you invited me here to humiliate me, congratulations. You've succeeded." Daniel looked up, guilt flashing in his eyes. "Elena, no, she just what?" I interrupted. She wanted to break us apart? Because if that was her goal, she's doing an excellent job. I stood up, my hands trembling. The room felt too small, too heavy with history and pain that didn't belong to me but was now mine to carry. Margaret's expression didn't change. She simply said, "You deserve to know what you're walking into. Love is blind, but it shouldn't be foolish." Her voice cracked slightly, betraying the emotion she'd been trying to hide. And for the first time, I realized, this wasn't about hatred. It was about fear. Fear that history would repeat itself. Fear that her son would be hurt the same way again. Som ambiente, silencio, apenas o som de chuva suavizando. I turned to Daniel, tears finally falling. "Do you believe her?" He hesitated. Just a heartbeat. But it was enough. That hesitation, that pause, told me more than any answer ever could. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair and whispered, "I need some air." And before he could stop me, I was already at the door. Som de pasos apressados, porta brindo, chuva forte batendo, vento soprando. A voz de narradora continua en cuanto ella camina. The cold rain hit my face the moment I stepped outside. It was freezing, but I barely felt it. My mind was spinning. I walked down the driveway, my heels sinking into the wet gravel, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't even know what to believe anymore. Was my father the monster she said he was? Or was there something more? Something no one had ever told me? A voz de narradora esse suaviza, com tom de melancolia e introspecco. I stood there in the rain, looking up at the house where my future was supposed to begin, and I realized something heartbreaking. Even before we could say, "I do," our love was already being tested by ghosts from the past. And those ghosts weren't going to disappear easily. That night, I didn't go back inside. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away, with tears in my eyes, questions in my mind, and a truth I wasn't ready to face burning in my heart. Som ambiente. O som do motor esse afastando, chuva diminuindo. Piano suave toca ao fundo. Narradora, voz baixa, que susurrando. That dinner wasn't just about family. It was the beginning of everything that would soon fall apart. And I didn't know it then. But that night, that simple dinner, had just rewritten my entire life. For a few seconds after she said those words, "That man destroyed my family," the air in the room seemed to freeze. I could hear nothing but the rain against the windows and the faint ticking of the antique clock on the wall. My father's name, Robert Langford, echoed inside my mind, over and over again. It was like the walls were closing in around me, suffocating me with a truth I wasn't ready to face. I looked at Daniel, hoping he would laugh it off, tell me his mother was mistaken, that this was just some awful misunderstanding. But he didn't say a word. He was staring at his mother, eyes wide, a muscle twitching in his jaw. And that silence was worse than anything she could have said. Som de respiração contida, de fundo o barulho de chuva aumentando. "Margaret," he finally said, voice low but firm. "What are you talking about?" She didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed fixed on me, sharp, assessing, almost triumphant. As if, after years of searching, she'd finally uncovered a secret that had been haunting her. She took a small sip of wine before speaking again. 25 years ago, my husband, your father, Daniel, had a business partner. A man named Robert Langford. Your father trusted him completely. They built their company together from nothing. They were like brothers. Her words came out slowly, carefully, like she wanted each one to hit its mark. And then, one night, everything vanished. Every dollar, every asset, every dream your father had worked for. Gone. He came home shattered. Broken. He said Robert took everything. That he vanished with the money and left us ruined. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. My father? The man who used to carry me on his shoulders and tell me bedtime stories about honesty and love? A thief? I shook my head slightly, barely able to whisper. That can't be true. Margaret's eyes flickered, not with cruelty, but with something that almost looked like grief. Believe me, dear, she said quietly, I wish it weren't. I wasn't planning to show you this until after the wedding, she said. But maybe it's better you know now, before you tie yourself to that name forever. The folder was yellowed, its edges torn, the paper inside brittle with age. Daniel opened it hesitantly. Inside were photos. 2 men smiling in front of a new office building. My father and Daniel's father. And beneath the photos, letters, contracts, bank statements. The numbers didn't lie. They painted a story, one where my father's signature appeared next to unauthorized withdrawals, falsified documents, disappearing funds. Daniel's hands shook as he flipped through the pages. His face turned pale. He didn't look at me. I could feel my throat tightening. The words I wanted to say, this isn't true. My father wasn't like that. Died before they left my lips. Because deep down, a part of me wondered, what if it was true? What if I had been living all my life under the shadow of a lie? Som ambiente. Chuva mais forte, trovos, vento. The candles flickered violently as the storm outside grew louder. Margaret sat back down, watching me quietly, like she was waiting for me to defend myself. But I couldn't. I didn't even know where to begin. Finally, I said softly, if you invited me here to humiliate me, congratulations. You've succeeded. Daniel looked up, guilt flashing in his eyes. Elena, no, she just what? I interrupted. She wanted to break us apart? Because if that was her goal, she's doing an excellent job. I stood up, my hands trembling. The room felt too small, too heavy with history and pain that didn't belong to me but was now mine to carry. Margaret's expression didn't change. She simply said, you deserve to know what you're walking into. Love is blind, but it shouldn't be foolish. Her voice cracked slightly, betraying the emotion she'd been trying to hide. And for the first time, I realized, this wasn't about hatred. It was about fear. Fear that history would repeat itself. Fear that her son would be hurt the same way again. Som ambiente, silencio, apenas o som de chuva suavizando. I turned to Daniel, tears finally falling. Do you believe her? He hesitated. Just a heartbeat. But it was enough. That hesitation, that pause, told me more than any answer ever could. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair and whispered, I need some air. And before he could stop me, I was already at the door. Som de pasos apressados, porta brindo, chuva forte batendo, vento soprando. A voz de narradora continua en cuanto ella camina. The cold rain hit my face the moment I stepped outside. It was freezing, but I barely felt it. My mind was spinning. I walked down the driveway, my heels sinking into the wet gravel, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't even know what to believe anymore. Was my father the monster she said he was? Or was there something more? Something no one had ever told me? A voz de narradora se suaviza, com tom de melancolia e introspecco. I stood there in the rain, looking up at the house where my future was supposed to begin, and I realized something heartbreaking. Even before we could say, I do, our love was already being tested by ghosts from the past. And those ghosts weren't going to disappear easily. That night, I didn't go back inside. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away, with tears in my eyes, questions in my mind, and a truth I wasn't ready to face burning in my heart. Som ambiente. O som do motor se afastando, chuva diminuindo. Piano suave toca ao fundo. Narradora, vos baixa, que susurrando. That dinner wasn't just about family. It was the beginning of everything that would soon fall apart. And I didn't know it then. But that night, that simple dinner, had just rewritten my entire life. Fim do capítulo 2. Decide que eu continue como capítulo 3, The Secret Revealed, mantendo esse mesmo formato longo, cinematográfico Ingalls, com atmosfera emotional, pausas e tensão crescente? Você diz, sim. O chat GPT diz. Perfeito. Crescent Moon. Agora comica o capítulo 3, The Secret Revealed, narrado em primeira pessoa, no mesmo estilo cinematográfico e emotional, com descrições ricas, atmosfera sombria e crescente tensão. Este capítulo representa o momento em que a verdade comica a emerger, e Helena, confusa, ferida e determinada, busca respostas. A duração aproximada deste trecho equivale a cerca de 15 minutos de narração continua. Clapperboard Chapter 3. The Secret Revealed. Som ambiente. Chuva diminuindo. Motor de carro desligando. O som dos limpadores de para-brisa para. Silencio. Apenas a respiração de narradora. Narradora, voz suave, cansada. I don't remember much of the drive back home. The world outside the windshield was just a blur of rain and streetlights. My thoughts louder than the thunder that had chased me all the way down the hill. I kept replaying her words in my mind. That man destroyed my family. They echoed like a curse. My father's name, a name I'd carried all my life, suddenly felt like a burden I didn't deserve to bear. When I reached my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat there in the dark, still wearing the same dress, still shaking. The wedding invitations sat neatly stacked on the table. White envelopes. Golden letters. They looked so fragile now. Like promises written in sand. Som ambiente. Leave travail distant. Relogio marcando one de manha. I tried to call Daniel. No answer. I typed a message. I need to talk to you. Please tell me you don't believe her. But the screen stayed cold, silent. The little dots that usually danced before he replied never appeared. And that silence was the loudest sound in the world. Som ambiente. Vento batendo na janela, o som suave de relogio antigo. I walked over to my dresser and opened the small wooden box my mother had given me before she died. Inside were a few photos. Old, faded, worn with time. One of them was of my father, holding me in his arms. He looked so happy. So pure. That wasn't the face of a thief. That wasn't the face of a man capable of betrayal. Next to the photo, there was a letter. I'd read it before, but that night it felt different. His handwriting was neat, precise, almost elegant. My dear Elena, if one day you have questions about me, I hope you'll look for truth, not stories. Truth doesn't hide forever. It waits patiently for the right heart to find it. I had never really understood what he meant. But now, it felt like a clue. Like he knew this moment would come. Som ambiente. O som de gavetas abrindo, papias sendo remexidos. I spent the next few hours searching through every box, every file, every trace of his past that my mother had kept. Letters, bills, old documents, everything. And then, I found it. A folder hidden inside a hollow book. Inside were contracts, old business papers between my father and someone named Charles Whitmore. Daniel's father. There were signatures, numbers, dates, and one page that looked like a letter never sent. It was written by my father, addressed to Charles. I know about the missing money. I can't protect you much longer. They're going to find out. I'll take the blame, but promise me, you'll keep your family safe. Margaret doesn't deserve this pain. My hands trembled as I read those words. He didn't steal anything. He took the blame. He sacrificed himself for them. I sat on the floor, the papers scattered around me, tears blurring the ink. Everything she said, every accusation, it was all a lie. But not out of malice, out of ignorance. She didn't know the truth either. None of them did. And now, years later, that lie had poisoned everything. Had ruined love, trust, and the future I was supposed to have. I wiped my tears and looked at the clock. It was almost 4 a.m. My wedding was in less than 12 hours. But at that moment, I wasn't thinking about vows or flowers. I was thinking about justice. Som ambiente. Som de caro legando novamente, as ruas ainda malhadas de chuva. I grabbed the folder, stuffed the letters inside my purse, and drove back toward the Whitmore estate. The streets were empty, the world still asleep. I felt like I was racing against destiny itself. When I reached their house, the sky was beginning to lighten, the faint blue of dawn spreading across the clouds. I parked in front, took a deep breath, and stepped out. The air was cold. The kind of cold that wakes you completely. I walked up the path to the door and knocked. Once. Twice. Then again. Finally, the door opened. Margaret stood there, wrapped in a robe, her face pale and tired. She looked surprised, and maybe a little frightened, to see me standing there, drenched, eyes red, holding a folder in my hand. "Elena? What on earth?" "We need to talk," I interrupted. "Now." "Som ambiente. Pasos y coando dentro de casa. O fogo de la herrera ascendendo, leave estilo de Madeira." She led me to the sitting room. The same room where we had dinner hours before. The candles had burned out. The smell of wine and herbs still lingered in the air. I placed the folder on the table. "You wanted the truth, Mrs. Whitmore. Here it is." She frowned, confused, then opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the pages, the same documents, the same signatures she thought proved her husband's innocence. But now, she was seeing the other half of the story. Then she reached the letter. Her hands trembled as she read it. Her lips parted slightly, whispering my father's name under her breath. He knew," she said weakly. "He took the blame?" I nodded. "He didn't destroy your family, Mrs. Whitmore. He saved it." Her eyes filled with tears. She sat down slowly, as if the weight of 25 years had just landed on her shoulders. I believed him. I believed my husband when he said Robert betrayed him. He swore it. I built my hate on that lie. For a moment, she looked smaller. Not the proud, distant woman I'd met before, but just a mother who had been living with the wrong version of the past. Som ambiente. Pasos descendo as escadas, Daniel Aparis, vos sonolenta. "Mom? Elena?" Daniel stood in the doorway, hair messy, wearing a white shirt and confusion all over his face. When he saw me, his expression changed, relief, guilt, and something like fear. "You came back," he said softly. I turned to him, tears running freely down my face now. "Because I had to. Because I couldn't let us be destroyed by a lie." He looked between me and his mother, then at the papers on the table. He picked them up, his eyes scanning each page. Then he froze on the letter. "Dad, he was the one," he whispered. Margaret covered her face with her hands. "I didn't know, Daniel. I swear to you I didn't know." Som ambiente. O relogio marca 6:30 de manhã. O fogo crepita na lareira. Daniel walked over to me, his voice breaking. "Elena. I'm sorry. I should have defended you. I should have trusted you." I shook my head. "It's not about trust anymore. It's about truth." He reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek gently. "Then let's face it together." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that love could survive something like this. But as I looked around that room, at the ghosts of their past, the ashes of my father's reputation, I realized love wasn't enough to erase history. Som ambiente. Musica lenta y emotional. Violino suave ao fundo. We sat there in silence as the sun rose through the rain, casting golden light through the window. For the first time I saw the truth clearly, and it hurt. But in that pain there was also something beautiful. Closure. The truth had been buried for decades. But now it had a voice. And as Margaret whispered a quiet apology to the memory of my father, I felt something shift inside me. A quiet peace, mixed with grief. Because finally, I understood. Sometimes love doesn't save us from pain. It leads us straight to it, so that we can heal from what we were never meant to carry. Som ambiente. Fade out de musica. O som leave de chuva cessando completamente. Narradora, voz serena. That morning, as the storm passed and the world turned gold again, I realized that the night before my wedding had already changed me. Forever. Fim do capítulo 3. Decide que eu continue como capítulo 4. The storm within, tambum longo e cinematográfico, seguindo imediatamente após essa revelação. Mostrando as ricos emocionais, os conflitos entre Helena e Daniel, e a dor que vem depois da verdade? Você diz, sim. O chat GPT diz. Perfeito. Cloud with rain. Agora comica o capítulo 4, The Storm Within, narrado em primeira pessoa, com o mesmo tom cinematográfico, emotional e introspectivo. Esse é o capítulo em que Helena, mesmo após a verdade veritona, precisa lidar com as consequências emocionais. A culpa, o silêncio, o medo e o amor testado ao limite. A narrativa é longa, detalhada e carrega atmosfera tensa e triste que precede o ponto de virada da história. Clapperboard Chapter 4. The Storm Within. Som ambiente. O livre crepitar de l'era, o som distante chuva diminuindo. Uma brisa fria entra pela janela semi-aberta. A voz de narradora comica, suave e exausta. Narradora, voz baixa, cansada, introspectiva. The sun had already risen by the time the truth sank in. The rain had stopped, but the air still felt heavy, as if the storm had decided to stay, just in a different form. Inside me. Margaret sat by the window, clutching the letter she once believed was proof of betrayal. Daniel paced the room silently, his hands in his hair, his eyes distant. No one said a word for a long time. It was as if all of us were standing inside a memory we didn't belong to. One built on decades of silence, guilt, and misunderstanding. Som ambiente. O estilo suave do fogo e o conto livre de passaros ao amanhecer. When I finally spoke, my voice didn't even sound like my own. I don't know what happens now, I said quietly. Margaret looked up at me, her eyes red but softer than I'd ever seen them. You should hate me, she whispered. After what I did to you last night. After the things I said. I shook my head slowly. No. You didn't destroy me. You just opened a wound I didn't know existed. For the first time she smiled. Not with pride, but with pain. A real smile. A human one. He was a good man, wasn't he? She asked, voice trembling. The best, I replied. He never had much, but he gave everything to protect the people he loved. Her eyes glistened as she whispered. And I hated him for it. For all these years, I've hated the wrong man. Som ambiente. Daniel suspira fundo. O som de pasos lentos sobre o piso de madeira. Daniel stopped pacing. He turned to face me, and the look in his eyes nearly broke me. It was love, guilt, confusion, all tangled together. Elena, he said softly, I don't know what to say. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my father. It's all gone. I nodded, tears forming again. And everything I thought I knew about our love. It feels different now too. He stepped closer, his hand reaching for mine, but I hesitated. Not out of anger, but because I didn't know how to touch something that had suddenly become so fragile. Do you still want to marry me? I asked quietly. His breath caught. He didn't answer right away. That hesitation, small, almost invisible, hurt more than any truth. Som ambiente. O som do vento soprando suavemente pelas cortinas. He finally said, yes. But maybe not today. It was like the air left the room. Our wedding day. The day we had dreamed about for months, planned for down to the smallest detail. Suddenly didn't feel real anymore. So we just stop? I asked, my voice trembling. He shook his head, stepping closer. No. We pause. Because I need to understand who I am before I can promise you who I'll be. Those words were honest, maybe even wise. But they felt like goodbye. Som ambiente, silencio pasado, o tic-tac do relogio encendo o vazio. Margaret stood up and walked over to me. She placed her hand gently on my shoulder. You deserve a wedding that isn't haunted by ghosts, she said softly. You deserve peace, Elena. Her words were kind. Too kind. And that kindness made me cry harder than her accusations ever did. I wanted to scream, to run, to tear off the invisible weight of everything that had just happened. But instead, I just stood there. Numb, suspended between love and loss. Som ambiente. O vento aumenta levemente, indicando que uma nova chuva se aproxima. I walked to the front door. Outside, the sky was gray again, the kind of gray that doesn't promise rain or sun, just uncertainty. I turned to Daniel one last time. He was standing in the doorway, watching me, his hands buried in his pockets. "I'll still be there," he said softly. "At the church. Even if it's just to see you walk away." I smiled through tears. "You're not losing me, Daniel. You're just giving me back to myself." And with that, I walked out into the cold morning air. Som ambiente. Som de pasos lentos no cascalho malhado, o ruido distante trovo suaves. As I drove away from the house, I saw the first drops of rain return, gentle, hesitant, like even the sky didn't know if it should cry or not. The city was waking up. People rushing to work, cars honking, life continuing as if my world hadn't just collapsed and rearranged itself in one night. But mine had. Everything had. My phone buzzed again. A message from my wedding planner asking if I'd prefer white or ivory ribbons on the chairs. I stared at the screen for a long time. And then I turned it off. Som ambiente. O som de chuva no parabrisa, respiraceo profunda de Naradora. I drove aimlessly for hours. Through roads I didn't recognize. Through neighborhoods I'd never seen before. At some point, I found myself at the edge of a lake. The same lake where Daniel and I had our first picnic 2 summers ago. The rain had stopped again, leaving the water perfectly still. I sat on the hood of my car, staring at the surface. Everything was so quiet. It almost felt like time had stopped just for me to think. And I thought about love, how fragile it is, how easily it bends under the weight of secrets. And yet, how strong it can be when truth finally shines through. My father's truth had cost him everything. And maybe in some strange way it had given me freedom. Freedom to know who I truly was. Freedom to love again, not because I needed to but because I chose to. Som ambiente. O som de agua calma batendo na margem, leave piano comica ao fundo. I looked at my reflection in the water, eyes red, mascara gone, dress ruined, and whispered to myself, "You'll be okay, Elena. You'll find peace in the storm." And for the first time in years I believed it. Because storms don't last forever. But they do change the landscape they touch. That morning, as the clouds finally broke and a single ray of sunlight hit the lake, I realized that love, real love, isn't proven at the altar. It's proven in the fire. In the silence. In the moments when everything falls apart. And somehow, you still have the strength to hope again. Som ambiente. Musica aumenta suavemente, piano com violino, luz do sol se espalhando sobre o lago. Naradora, voz serena, emocionada. The storm outside had passed. But the one inside me was slowly learning how to calm too. And maybe, just maybe, that was what healing truly looked like. Fade out de musica. Som suave do vento. Silencio. Fim do capítulo 4. Deseja que continue como capítulo 5. The drive home, também extenso. Mostrando Elena sozinha após o cancelamento do casamento, refletindo sobre amor, perda e destino. Mantendo o mesmo ritmo cinematográfico e profundo? Você diz, sim. O chat GPT diz. Perfeito crescent moon. Agora comica o capítulo 5, The Drive Home. Uma continuação de rida e emocionalmente profunda. Elena volta para casa após a manhã mais difícil de sua vida. Este capítulo mostra a solidão, o vazio do pós-verdade, e o lento nascimento de força interior que vem depois do colapso. A narração é lenta, visual e carregada de emoção. Feita como se ela mesma estivesse contando o que vivo, alhando para trás, talvez anos depois. Clapperboard Chapter 5. The Drive Home. Som ambiente. O ronco bixodum caro na estrada, chuva fina batendo no parabrisa, respiracao cansada. Naradora, voz baixa, melancolica. The road stretched endlessly before me. Gray, wet, silent. Every mile I drove felt like a lifetime I was leaving behind. I had no destination. Only distance. Distance from the house, from the truth, from the ghost of the wedding that would never happen. The rain came and went in waves, like it was breathing with me. Slow, uneven, uncertain. Sometimes I'd turn on the wipers just to hear them move. That sound, that rhythm, was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. Som ambiente. O som de radio bixo, Uma musica antiga, triste, tocando no fundo, quase inaudible. I didn't even notice when I left the city. The signs blurred. Gas stations, diners, trees. All of it blended into one long, quiet road. At some point, I stopped at a small rest area. A lonely cafe with flickering neon lights. It was nearly empty. Only a waitress cleaning tables and a man reading a newspaper in the corner. When she asked what I wanted, I said, "Coffee," but my voice cracked halfway through. She didn't ask questions. Just brought the cup, steaming, strong, bitter. And for a moment, that warmth in my hands made me feel human again. Som ambiente. O tilantar de zicaras, a porta brindo como som de sininho, chuva batendo na janela. I sat there for almost an hour, staring at nothing. People came and went. A couple laughed quietly at a table near the window. And I thought, that should have been me today. I should have been wearing white, smiling, surrounded by flowers, not rain. But the truth is, I wasn't ready for that happiness. Not yet. I had built my love on a foundation I didn't even know was cracked. How could I build a future when the past had been buried under lies I didn't uncover until the night before my wedding? Som ambiente. Som de travail distant. Chuva diminuindo. I opened my phone. There were dozens of messages. From friends, from family, from the wedding planner. One said, "We're all waiting for you at the church, Elena. Are you okay?" I stared at it for a long time. Then I simply wrote back. "Tell them. There won't be a wedding today." And I turned the phone off again. For the first time, I wasn't running away from the truth. I was walking toward it. Slowly, painfully, but freely. Som ambiente. O som do caro ligando novamente. Chuva leve, estrada umida. I got back into the car. The road home felt endless. But this time I wasn't afraid of it. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that used to make me uncomfortable, but now, it felt necessary. As I drove, I began to remember small things about my father. His laugh. The way he'd fix the broken fence every spring. How he'd tell me, "Truth doesn't destroy love, Elena. Lies do." I used to think that meant love could survive anything. Now I realized it meant love needs truth to breathe. And ours had been suffocating for years. Som ambiente. Vento aumentando. Folhas batendo no caro. Musica suave de piano comica ao fundo. By the time I reached my old apartment, the sky was clearing. The sun was breaking through the clouds, timidly, like it was asking permission to shine again. I parked, turned off the engine, and just sat there, watching the light reflect on the wet pavement. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't crying. I was just still. When I finally stepped out, everything smelled like rain and new beginnings. The air was cool, the streets quiet, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. The same bell that would have marked the start of my wedding. Instead, it marked something else. My freedom. Som ambiente. Passos lentos subindo escadas. O clique de chave na porta. O som de apartamento vazio. Inside, everything was just as I left it. The dress hanging by the window. The shoes by the mirror. The bouquet, now slightly wilted, sitting on the table. I walked over, touched the flowers gently. They still smelled sweet, faintly of roses and promise. Then I opened the window. The wind blew in, lifting the veil that had been lying across the chair. It floated for a moment before falling to the floor. Soft, quiet, final. And that's when I whispered, "It's over." But deep down, I knew it wasn't an ending. It was something else. The painful kind of beginning that only comes after you've lost everything. Som ambiente. Piano mais forte agora, sons de lembranca sobre pastos, risos, promessas, o som de chuva do jantar fatídico. I sat by the window for hours, watching the world outside move on. And I thought about Daniel. Where he was. What he was thinking. If he missed me, or if he was relieved. But love isn't always about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting the other person face their own truth. Maybe one day we'd find each other again. Or maybe that chapter had already ended. Either way, I knew I'd be okay. Because even broken hearts keep beating. Som ambiente. O piano así mistura ao som de chuva, fade out lento. Narradora, voz suave, resign ada, Moscom Esperanca. The drive home wasn't just about leaving him. It was about finding myself again. Piece by piece, mile by mile. And when I finally closed my eyes that night, I realized, peace doesn't always come with answers. Sometimes it comes with silence. And that's enough. Fade out completo. Som do vento leave. O ultimo accord de piano e coando. Fim do capítulo 5. KRKU continue como capítulo 6. Letters never sent. Onde Helena comica a escrever cartas para Daniel que ela nunca envia. Narrando os sentimentos, as memórias e a lenta transformação dela após o fim do casamento que nunca aconteceu? Seao capítulo mais introspectivo e poético e agora. Deseja que eu siga? Você diz. Sim. O chat GPT diz. Perfeito. Waxing crescent moon. Agora comica o capítulo 6. Letters never sent. Talvez o mais íntimo de todos eight aqui. Helena, já sozinha em casa. Passa as semanas seguintes tentando processar o que vivo. Ela comica a escrever cartas para Daniel. Neo para enviá-las, mas para se curar. Cada carta é reflexo de sua dor, de seu amor e, lentamente, de sua libertaco. A narração é lenta, poética, emotional, com pausas longas, respiração sentida, e aquele tipo de dor que amadurece o coração. Clapperboard Chapter 6. Letters never sent. Som ambiente. O som de uma caneta riscando papel. Chuva livre batendo contra a janela. Uma música de piano suave ao fundo. Narradora. Voz calma. Mas triste. The first letter I wrote was the night after everything ended. The apartment felt too quiet. Like the silence itself was watching me. The wedding dress was still hanging by the window, catching the faint light of the street lamp. I didn't have the courage to take it down yet. So I sat at my desk, with a cup of tea that had long gone cold, and began to write. Som ambiente. O som de caneta deslizando sobre o papel. Dear Daniel, I don't even know why I'm writing this. Maybe because silence has too many answers and none of them sound right. Today, I walked to the lake again, the same one where we planned to take our wedding photos. The water was calm. I almost saw us there, laughing, pretending the world was simple. But the truth is, I don't hate you. I just can't carry your confusion on my shoulders anymore. I stopped there, staring at the ink drying on the paper. It felt final. But it wasn't. That was only the first of many letters that would never find their way to him. Som ambiente. Paginas verando, som de relogio marcando o tempo, chuva constant. The second letter came 3 days later. This one started differently. Dear Daniel, I dreamed of your mother last night. She was sitting in her garden, wearing the same blue dress she had on the night before our wedding. Only this time she smiled. Not at me but at you. Maybe that means something. Maybe she's learning to forgive the ghosts too. That letter made me cry. Not because I missed him, but because I missed the version of us that could have been. I realized then, love doesn't die when the relationship ends. It changes shape. It becomes something quieter, softer, sometimes almost holy. A space in your chest that hurts and heals at the same time. Som ambiente. O vento soprando, o som distante relogio do igreja marcando meia-noite. Weeks passed. The letters piled up in a wooden box by my bedside. Each one was a confession, a truth I hadn't been brave enough to say out loud. Sometimes, I'd wake in the middle of the night and write by candlelight. Not because I wanted him back, but because I needed to understand why letting go hurt as much as holding on. Som ambiente. Caneta escrivendo novamente. Dear Daniel, I saw a couple in the park today. They were arguing, quietly, like we used to when we were trying not to wake the world. The girl started crying. And he just stood there, helpless. I wanted to tell them, don't wait until love becomes a war of silence. But I didn't. Some lessons are meant to be learned the hard way. Som ambiente. Respiração funda. Piano continua. By the fifth letter, something inside me began to shift. I wrote less about him and more about myself. My fears. My regrets. My small victories, like cooking breakfast without crying. Or walking by the wedding boutique without stopping. Dear Daniel, I think I'm learning how to breathe again. It's strange how the same world that broke you can also heal you, if you let it. I don't know where you are, or what you're doing, but I hope the truth brings you peace. The same way it's finally starting to bring me mine. When I finished that one, I didn't cry. I smiled. Som ambiente. Chava para. O som de pasaros ao amanhecer. The next morning, I opened the window. The air smelled like wet earth and hope. The kind of morning that almost feels like an apology from the universe. I took all the letters, tied them with a white ribbon, and placed them inside a wooden box. Not to hide them but to keep them safe. They weren't just letters to Daniel. They were letters to myself. To the woman who survived the truth. Who walked away from the altar and still found the strength to love again. Even if that love was now directed inward. Som ambiente. O som de uma gaveta fachando, piano suave si mistura ao canto dos pasaros. Narradora, voz suave. Contemplativa. We spend our lives waiting for someone to write back. But sometimes the words we send into the silence are the only ones we were ever meant to hear. And as I looked at that box one last time, I realized something. I didn't need him to answer. Because every letter I wrote had already brought me closer to myself. Pausa longa. Musica sob lentamente. Tom Esperancoso. Narradora. Love doesn't always end in weddings. Sometimes it ends in words. In quiet rooms. In unsent letters. In the stillness after the storm. And that's okay. Because not every love story is meant to last forever. Some are meant to change us. To turn the pain into wisdom. And the loss into light. Fade out de musica. Psalm final. O fecho de caixa de madeira sendo trancado. Silencio. Fim do capítulo 6. KRKEU continue como capítulo 7, The Return. No qual, meses depois, Helena e Daniel se reencontram por acaso. Neo como amantes tentando reater, mas como duas pessoas diferentes, transformadas pelo tempo? Esse é o capítulo do reencontro. Caio de Sudaliza, Imoco contaida e redenqueo. Deseja que eu siga? Você diz. Sim. O chat GPT diz. Perfeito. Sun behind small cloud. Agora comica o capítulo 7, The Return. O reencontro. Passaram meses. Helena e Daniel Neo asivim desde o dia em que ela saiu daquela casa. El seguiram caminhos diferentes. Mas o destino, sempre curioso, cruza suas vidas novamente. Este capítulo é longo, maduro e sereno. Como moco contaida e uma sensação de encerramento. Neo é sobre reviver o passado. Mas sobre fazer as pazes com ele. Clapperboard Chapter 7. The Return. Som ambiente. Manha de primavera. O som de passaros, vento leve nas arvores. Voz suave. Nostálgica. Narradora, voz serena. Como leve sorriso. 6 months had passed. 6 months since the night everything changed. Since the wedding that never happened. Life had become quieter. Gentler somehow. I moved to a new apartment. Smaller, simpler, filled with sunlight. I started teaching again, part-time, helping children with writing and reading. Their laughter healed something in me that I didn't even know was still broken. There were days when I thought of him. Not with pain anymore, but with a strange kind of peace. Like remembering a song you once loved. Even though you can't recall all the lyrics anymore. Som ambiente. O som de uma cafeteria movimentada. Voces baixas, zícaras tilintando, música ambiente suave. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I had just finished a class and stopped at a little cafe near the park. The same park where, months ago, I used to sit and write those letters I never sent. I ordered my usual. Black coffee, 2 sugars, and sat by the window, watching the world move on. And then I saw him. Daniel. He was standing across the street, talking to an older woman, holding a bouquet of lilies. He looked different. Calmer. Tired, maybe, but in a peaceful way. My heart didn't race. It didn't ache. It just recognized him. Som ambiente. Pasos lentos, o sino de porta de cafeteria tocando. He walked in a few minutes later. Maybe he saw me. Maybe fate decided we'd see each other at the exact same time. Either way, he froze for a second, then smiled. A small, hesitant smile. The kind you give someone you once loved deeply and never really stopped caring for. Elena, he said softly. Daniel. My name sounded strange on his lips after so long. Not heavy. Not painful. Just real. Som ambiente. O som de caderas esse movendo, zikra servidas. We sat. No grand gestures, no tears. Just two people sharing a table again. The same table where our story might have begun. Or maybe, where it was finally ready to end properly. He looked at me for a long time before speaking. I heard you moved, he said. Yeah, I smiled. Smaller place. But it's mine. He nodded, that same quiet nod I used to love. You look different, he said. So do you, I replied. We both laughed softly. The kind of laugh that carries a hint of nostalgia and forgiveness all at once. Som ambiente. Musica de piano muito leve, quase imperceptible. I went to the lake last month, he said after a pause. It looked exactly the same. It always does, I said. That's the cruel thing about places. They stay still while we change. He smiled faintly. I kept wondering if I'd see you there. I looked down at my cup, tracing the rim with my finger. You almost did. I go there sometimes too. To think. To write. Still writing letters? He asked gently. I hesitated. Then smiled. No. Not anymore. I ran out of things to say to someone who's no longer here. He nodded. He understood. Som ambiente. Passos de pessoas passando. O sino de porta brindo e fechando de vez em quando. For a moment, we just sat in silence. No awkwardness. No bitterness. Just the quiet understanding that comes when two souls finally stop fighting the past. My mother's been better, he said softly. She wanted me to tell you that. She's sorry. I took a deep breath. That name, Margaret, still carried a shadow but not a wound. Tell her I said thank you, I whispered. For everything. Even the hard parts. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw tears forming in his eyes. I don't think I ever told you how much you changed me, he said. Not just that night. After it. I had to face things I never wanted to see. So did I said softly. But maybe that's what love's supposed to do. Show us who we are, even when it hurts. Som ambiente. Chuva leve comica do lado de fora. O som familiar de noite do jantar. The irony wasn't lost on us. Rain. Again. Always the rain. As if it had been the silent witness to everything between us. He looked out the window and smiled. Do you ever think we could have made it? I thought for a moment. The question deserved an honest answer. Maybe, I said. But not then. Not with all the ghosts still in the room. We needed time to learn how to live without needing to fix each other. He nodded slowly. I think you're right. Then, after a long pause, he whispered. I'm happy you're okay. And that was all I needed. No confessions. No apologies. Just that simple truth. Som ambiente. O som de chuva suave constante. Piano crescendo lentamente. When he stood to leave, he hesitated. Elena. Maybe someday we'll. I shook my head gently. Don't finish that sentence, Daniel. Some stories are perfect because they end when they need to. He smiled. A real, genuine smile. And for the first time since that night, his eyes looked free. Goodbye, Elena. Goodbye, Daniel. Som ambiente. O sino de porta tocando quando ele sai. Chuva continua. Musica suave. I watched him walk away, his figure fading into the gray drizzle outside. No tears this time. No ache. Just quiet gratitude. Because love had come and gone. But what remained was peace. Som ambiente. Elena suspira fundo. Pega o guarda-chuva, pega canta. Passos na calcada malhada. As I stepped outside, the rain hit my face, cool and gentle. And for the first time in months, I didn't run from it. I just let it fall. Narradora, voz serena, quase serindo. Sometimes love doesn't come back to stay. Sometimes it returns just to show you how far you've come. And as I walked away from that cafe, I realized, I didn't lose him. I just found myself. Fade out de musica. Som final. O ruido livre de chuva. O som dos passos desaparecendo na distancia. Fim do capítulo 7. Deseja que eu continue como capítulo 8. The letter he found. Onde, meses depois, Daniel descobre uma das cartas que Helena havia escrito. E o capítulo é contado do ponto de vista dele pela primeira vez? Seria o primeiro momento de história narrado por Daniel, mostrando o que ele sentiu e aprendeu após o reencontro. Deseja seguir assim? Você diz, sim. O ChatGPT diz. Perfeito. Sunrise. Agora comica o capítulo 8, the letter he found. Narrado pelo ponto de vista de Daniel, pela primeira vez. Este capítulo mostra o impacto das cartas de Helena sobre ele, como ele reflete sobre o passado, suas escalas e o que perdeu. A narrativa mantém o estilo emocionally cinematográfico, mas agora mergulha na alma dele, criando contraste com os capítulos anteriores narrados por Helena. Clapperboard Chapter 8. The letter he found. Som ambiente. Manha silenciosa, passaros cantando, som de papel sendo destabrado. Voz de Daniel, calma mas carregada de remoco. Daniel, voz baixa reflexiva. I never expected to find it. Not here, not now. The apartment was quiet. Quieter than I remembered. The sunlight spilled through the windows, dust motes dancing lazily in the golden light. It was the kind of morning that makes you think life hasn't moved, even though everything has. I was searching for something. A book I'd borrowed years ago. Instead, I found a small wooden box, tucked neatly under her desk. It was simple, unassuming, and yet, it held a weight that could crush a man. I hesitated before opening it. Part of me wanted to run. Part of me knew I couldn't. Som ambiente. Som de tampa de caixa sendo aberta, folhas de papel deslizando. Inside were letters. Her handwriting. Every word perfectly formed, honest, raw. I recognized her voice immediately, the voice I had chased, argued with, and loved more than I could admit. I picked up the first letter and began to read. Dear Daniel, I don't even know why I'm writing this. Maybe because silence has too many answers and none of them sound right. The words hit me like a wave. Each line, each sentence, was a revelation. She had carried everything inside her, the hurt, the love, the fear, silently. And I had been too blind, too wrapped up in my own confusion to see it. Som ambiente. Respiração profunda de Daniel. Som de papel sendo folheado. I read every letter. All of them. And with each one, I felt a part of my past unravel. The pride, the anger, the assumptions I had clung to for months. She didn't write these letters to me. She wrote them for herself. And yet somehow by reading them I found myself. Love doesn't always end in weddings. Sometimes it ends in words, in quiet rooms, in unsent letters, in the stillness after the storm. And that's okay. The words echoed in my mind. I had spent so long trying to hold on, to fix something broken, that I never realized the most important thing was understanding. Som ambiente. Vento livre batendo na janela, som distante cidade. Tears came. Slowly. Quietly. I let them fall because, for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of them. I thought about the cafe. About that rainy afternoon when I saw her again. We didn't try to hold each other. We didn't speak of the past. And maybe, that was exactly what we needed. Now, with these letters in my hands, I understood her. Not just the woman I loved, but the woman she became. Strong. Independent. Free. Som ambiente. Piano suave entra, notas lentas, melancólicas. I folded the first letter carefully, almost reverently, and placed it back in the box. I knew I would never send a response. And I didn't need to. Her words had already spoken. Her letters had already reached me. And as I looked out the window, sunlight warming my face, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. I had loved her not for the future we could have had, but for the woman she was, the one who taught me to see beyond my own blindness, to feel without fear, and to forgive without words. Som ambiente. Som de folhas livre sendo arrumadas, vento na cortina, silencio confortável. I closed the box. It wasn't the end. It was understanding. Sometimes, love doesn't bring you together. Sometimes, it shows you the person you were meant to become. And I had become someone who could finally see, finally feel, finally understand. Elena, I will never forget what you taught me. And somehow that is enough. Fim do capítulo 8. Se quiser, posso continuar com o capítulo 9, the closure, onde Elena e Daniel finalmente encontram tipo de encerramento emocional definitivo. Narradora, voz calma, más profunda. It had been almost a year since the night before the wedding. Almost a year since everything fell apart. And everything began. Life had grown steady. Quiet. I had learned to cherish mornings that smelled like coffee and rain. To smile without expecting an answer. To love without needing possession. And then he appeared again. Not by chance. Or maybe, by the subtle will of fate. We met at the same park where our first date had ended in rain. The place where I had written letters I never sent. He was standing by the fountain, the sunlight catching the slight gray in his hair. And I realized how much time had changed us both. Elena, he said softly, voice careful, respectful. I didn't know if I'd see you here. Daniel, I said, smiling faintly. I wasn't sure either. We didn't sit at first. We walked slowly along the winding paths, letting the world pass between us without forcing conversation. I read your letters, he said finally, breaking the silence. All of them. I nodded, looking down at my hands. I know. You don't have to say anything else. No, he said softly. I do. I need to say it. They changed me. They made me understand everything I didn't see before. I paused. The weight of a year of questions, heartbreak, and unanswered words pressed gently against my chest. I'm glad you did, I whispered. We reached a small bench under a flowering tree. He sat, and I followed. The space between us was not uncomfortable. It was filled with a quiet respect that only truth can bring. I've thought about us, he said slowly. About the wedding we never had. About the words I left unsaid, the pain I caused. I've thought about it too, I said. But I also thought about who I needed to be after it all. And I realized, love isn't always about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting go, with grace, not bitterness. He nodded, looking at me with a soft, genuine smile. You've grown, Elena. Stronger than I ever imagined. And you, I said, have learned what I had to learn the hard way. That love isn't proof in ceremonies or promises. It's proof in honesty, in courage, in survival. Som ambiente. Leave som de folhas caindo, passaros cantando, vento suave. For a long while we just sat there, watching the park, watching life continue as if nothing had happened. And yet everything had. So, is this goodbye? He asked finally, almost hesitantly. I shook my head gently. Not goodbye. Closure. We're free now. Free from expectation, from pain, from the weight of what could have been. And that is a gift. He smiled, understanding. And in that moment, I realized, love doesn't always need to last to be real. Sometimes, its power lies in what it teaches you about yourself. Som ambiente. Luz dourada do sol atravessando as árvores, música de piano suave esperançosa. Elena, he said softly, standing. Thank you. For everything. Truly. And you, I replied. For seeing me. Even when it was too late to save us. We walked away from the bench in opposite directions. Not with sorrow, but with quiet smiles. Hearts lighter than they had been in years. Som ambiente. Passos esse afastando, folhas caindo suavemente, música de piano fade out. Narradora, voz serena, contemplativa. Closure isn't a moment of triumph. It's a quiet understanding. A gentle peace that settles over the heart. Teaching you that love, even when it ends, has the power to shape who you become. And as I walked back home, sunlight warming my face, I felt it, the storm had passed. The letters, the tears, the rain, the heartbreak. All of it had led me here. To freedom. To peace. To myself. Fade out completo. Som final. O vento e o canto de passaros. Silencio. The morning was quiet. The kind of morning that feels like the world has paused just to let you breathe. Sunlight spilled through my window, warming the room gently. It wasn't a wedding day. It wasn't a day marked by drama or revelations. It was simply mine. I stretched and looked out at the street below. Children ran past, dogs barked, neighbors waved. Life was happening, moving forward, and I was finally ready to move with it. Som ambiente. Som de zicaras na cozinha, o aroma do café fresco, leave som de cidade acordando. I made coffee, strong and bitter, just the way I liked it. No one was waiting for me. No obligations. No echoes of the past. Just silence. Soft, peaceful, and full of possibility. I picked up my journal and wrote a few lines. Not to Daniel. Not to anyone. Just to me. Today I am free. Free from the shadows of yesterday. Free from the weight of what I couldn't control. I am alive. I am here. And for the first time in a long time, I am exactly where I need to be. I closed the journal and smiled. Not a wistful smile. Not one that clings to memory. A smile that rises from the core of knowing. I can face whatever comes next. Som ambiente. Som de passos no chão de madeira, vento batendo levemente na cortina. I walked to the balcony and breathed deeply. The city was alive beneath me. The sky painted in soft shades of pink and gold. And somewhere far away, a church bell tolled softly. I didn't flinch. I didn't remember the pain. I remembered the lessons. The love that had shaped me. The freedom that had grown from the storm. Som ambiente. Vento suave, folhas dancando, passaros cantando. I thought of Daniel. Of the letters. Of the closure we had found. And I realized, love doesn't always end the way we imagine. Sometimes it ends in quiet understanding. Sometimes it ends in gratitude. Sometimes it ends and becomes part of who you are, quietly, beautifully. And that was enough. Som ambiente. Musica crescendo suavemente, cordas e piano em harmonia, atmosfera de renascimento. I stepped back inside. The apartment felt warm, safe, alive. I picked up the bouquet I had kept from that fateful night before the wedding. It was slightly wilted, a reminder of the past. But I didn't need it to bloom again. I had already bloomed. I placed it by the window, letting the sunlight touch it. A symbol of the woman I had become. Strong, whole, free. A new dawn isn't just the rising sun. It's the moment you step into your own life. Untouched by regret, unshaken by loss, and fully open to the possibilities ahead. I took a deep breath, letting the warmth fill me. I smiled at the day, at the world, at myself. The storm had passed. The rain had stopped. And I was home.